Hey folks, I'm Nate. I'm a technical marketing manager with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And today I'm here to show you a new way to purchase extended lifecycle support if you're in a cloud environment. First of all, a little bit of background. What is extended lifecycle support? Well, you might know that Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 recently went end of life. That is the end of June. The normal lifecycle for Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 ended. So if you have Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, that means you're no longer getting any updates for it. Mainly that means no more security fixes, and that can be really important in a world where you depend on RHEL for your highly critical workloads or perhaps even private data, right? You need a system that's up to date. So the answer we have for that has always been Extended Lifecycle Support, or ELS. That hasn't changed. Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 still has an Extended Lifecycle Support add-on that you can buy in the same way that you always have, which is upfront at the beginning of the year or at your renewal time, you buy X number of ELS add-ons, and then you attach them to systems, and off you go. Well, we realize that that isn't quite how people like to do it in cloud environments. In the cloud, maybe your systems aren't running all the time. Or maybe you're in the cloud and you have this really great plan to turn off all those RHEL 7 systems throughout the course of the next year. And you really don't want to buy all those add-ons up front. So for that, we have a new way to buy extended lifecycle support, which will bill you while your instances are on. Now, this is currently supported on Microsoft Azure and Amazon Web Services. This video is going to show you how to do it on Amazon Web Services. All right, so an important thing to call out here is that there are two separate methods which you could choose to follow to set up this billing method. Now, like I said, how this works is the cost data is sent from Red Hat back to your cloud provider. The cloud provider then bills you. There's two different ways for Red Hat to get that data. First is through a service called the host metering service, which works similar to, say, something like our Insights client, which takes information about your system, in this case, just your usage of extended lifecycle support, and sends it back to Red Hat. Red Hat can then say, okay, you used this much ELS on these many systems throughout the course of a month, and it sends that data off to your cloud provider bills you. The other method is using an integration between the Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console and the Cloud Console for your hyperscaler. In this case, we're talking about AWS. The cost data is exchanged directly between AWS and Red Hat. The only thing that has to happen on your systems is you enable the extended lifecycle support repository, which then, of course, reads package data directly from Red Hat, but doesn't send anything back out. So this is great for customers who don't want their servers sending data out to an external vendor like Red Hat. So you can see there's a trade-off there, right? One of them requires a service on your system. That's the host metering setup. The other requires very little changes to your system, but it requires some integration between Red Hat and your hyperscaler, in this case, AWS. So in this video, we're going to talk about the second option, which is cost management. That's where we set up an integration between the hybrid cloud console and your hyperscaler, AWS. So the first thing we're going to start with, and you'll probably have a much larger set of systems to deal with than I do for my demo. I have one Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 system, which was just spun up using our normal cloud images, and it's running on AWS. So first what I'm going to do is show you around that system, show you that it does not have extended lifecycle support currently mapped to it. We're going to make sure that it's up to date and things like that. Okay, so here we are. We're on the SSH console of my EC2 system. And you can see here, it's just a RHEL 7.9 system. And if I check for updates, it's telling me there's nothing available. Or it should, because I just updated this a few minutes ago. There you go. Now, if we do a yum repo list, it'll tell us it's got the plain old RHEL 7 Amazon-hosted RUI repositories, right? So that's that. Now, if we switch over to the AWS console, here I am looking at my AWS EC2 console. You see I've got two systems here. One's RHEL 7. The other one is RHEL 7-2. And RHEL 7-2 is the second one that I've set up. And that one is the one we're going to work on today. This first one, the RHEL 7 box, that one's already configured to use ELS, although I've undone some of the configuration because I need to be able to show you how to do it here. All right, so now that you've seen that I have a RHEL 7 system, just like maybe you do already, the next thing we have to do is buy the listing item from the AWS Marketplace that allows us to actually have a billing entry in your AWS account for extended lifecycle support for RHEL 7. So let's go do that. Our next step is to go and buy the listing on the AWS Marketplace. Now, I conveniently already have a tab open here that has the search results. Now, you can filter these all kinds of ways. The Amazon search results are what they are. When you search for a thing, it's not going to guarantee that you get the actual Red Hat listing in the marketplace. We've done a lot to try to keep the relevant stuff at the top, but it's, a competitive marketplace as you'd expect. So what I do is I just search for, at the top here, Red Hat Enterprise Linux Extended Lifecycle Support, and you're going to find a bunch of people that are offering ELS for CentOS, for RHEL, for lots of things. If you scroll down to an item here, you see it says Buy Red Hat. That's the official listing. Now, the other way you can do this is you can filter it by publisher. You can see Red Hat right here in the list. If I just check that, boom, now all we have is Red Hat. If you click on this, now I've already bought it, but you're going to have to buy or subscribe to this marketplace listing. Now, after you buy the listing, you're going to have to link your account to a Red Hat account. If you either don't have or don't know your Red Hat account, you're going to want to head over to console.redhat.com, and there's several options on how you can log in, or you can recover your password if you don't remember what it is, or you can register for an account right there, all on the login page. And then once you've done so, it recommends that you go check our documentation on how to configure the add-ons or the setup, right? And for that, there's a link right here in the listing, enabling Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 Extended Lifecycle Support via cloud marketplaces. And what that'll bring you to is this very helpful knowledge base article that tells you how to configure RHEL 7 ELS on the cloud. Now, this covers configuration for both cloud providers that we currently support, which is AWS and Azure, as I mentioned earlier. But we're going to follow the AWS instructions. So, first of all, step one is enable the hourly metering. Now, what this will do is it'll link out to a third piece of documentation because there's some nuance here based on which cloud provider you're on, what version of RHEL you're on, things like that. So if you click on that link, it'll bring you to yet a third document. And this actually has a pretty nice set of steps about how you configure all of the pieces, okay? So, first of all, you do need simple content access enabled. You see that here in the prerequisites at the very beginning. That's not that big of a deal because a lot of new accounts, they come out of the box with SCA already turned on. I'm not going to go too deep into what simple content access is, simply that it was a shift a couple years ago now in how we do subscription allocations and how you assign subscriptions to your systems. That has to be turned on your account. Once that's on, you can continue with the rest of the configuration. Now, enable cost metering using the Insights Cost Management is really what we're going to go in through here. You can see here there's instructions for AWS. Looks pretty straightforward. We have to configure a reporting source, which is what we're going to do first. We're going to set up tags on the systems. That's what I talked about in the overview at the beginning. And we're going to enable the metering service on your AWS integration. Now, some of this is done in the process of configuring the reporting source. We're going to set this up through the integrations in the hybrid cloud console. All right, so next on our list of things that need to get done is we have to set up an integration between Red Hat's hybrid cloud console and your AWS account. Okay, so here I am on the hybrid cloud console. What we want to do is go into settings at the top here and go to integrations. Now you're going to notice in here that I've already got some integrations configured, but you'll notice that there's nothing in here about cost. What we're going to add right now is an integration for cost. So we need to click the Add Integration button, and we're going to do Amazon Web Services and hit Next. We're going to call it AWS-cost because that's, straightforward. So we're going to go to Manual Configuration, and then we hit Next. And what this is going to do is it's going to basically take us through the steps, right? We want to do cost management. We're We're going to hit next. Okay, now we have to make an S3 bucket for cost usage. And we do that over on the AWS S3 console. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to hop back to my AWS dashboard. I'm going to go to Services and go to S3. And you'll probably notice that I already have a cost management bucket set. You can create a brand new one, or, well, you're going to want to use an empty one. So if you don't already have one specifically for cost, you're going to want to make an empty one. And in fact, let's go ahead and make one right now. We're going to call it rel cost demo. Okay. Now these bucket names have to be unique. So if you try to name yours rel cost demo and you're in the same region as me, it'll probably reject you. If someone else already has rel cost demo in place, it's going to reject me. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we're going to leave pretty much all the defaults here. If you know more about S3 buckets than I do and you need to change some of the rights and whatnot in there, go right ahead. Okay, so now we have rel cost demo. Now what we have to do is over here, we have to put rel cost demo. It's just the name of the bucket. And then we have to tell it what region we're in. Now I think I was US East 2. Let's go make sure. Yes, US East 2. That's that AWS region right there. And then we hit next. So this is the amount of data that's going to be sent to the bucket. I'm going to keep the defaults here. If you don't want to keep the defaults, then you're going to have to go through and read the docs on how to get that done. We're just going to say, I'm okay with sending the default data export for cost management. Tags, aliases, and organizational units. If you have a more complex AWS setup than I do, you may have to care about the account aliases and organizational units. If you have a deployment where you're using organizational units and there's people within those organizational units that are configuring rel systems, that's something you got to keep in mind. I'm going to go with include rel usage, but I'm not going to touch the account aliases and the organizational units. Now is where things start to get a little tricky. What we have to do now is we need to grant permission to the AWS cost management report that I just configured, right? It's going to have us create a policy over on our AWS console. So if we want to copy this JSON to the clipboard, all right, and then we have to go on over to the IAM management over at S3, or not over at S3, over at AWS. So we're going to go back to AWS here. We're going to go to IAM. We're going to go to policies and create a policy. All right. Now we're going to go to the JSON editor because it gave us JSON to put in here. We're going to do select all, paste. Simple as that. Now we are going to have to give it a name then. I think that's on the next screen. Okay, so policy name, we'll call it rel cost demo, just like we did for our S3 bucket. We can give it a description if we want to. Then we're going to hit create policy. Okay, so after I submit that, it brings us back to our list of policies. And if I change this from all types to customer managed, you can see my new rel cost demo policy that I added in here. Okay, now we're going to go back over to the integrations and see what it wants us to do next. Okay, from the AWS Identity Access Management console, create a new role. Okay, now we're making a role. Okay, so it's in the same IAM window we were in. Click on roles. Okay, now we're going to go create role. AWS account is the option we want to select at the top here, and then we want to select another AWS account. What this is doing is it's granting the account that the hybrid cloud console uses to interact with AWS access to certain things in your specifically the cost, that S3 bucket that we made and the cost data that's going to go into it. It's giving that access to your AWS account. Okay, so account ID, you might remember that right over here it showed us the account ID. We're going to copy the account ID and then we're going to paste it in here. Now there was a second field there, you might recall. It says require external ID. check that. You look back over here and it says paste the following value in the external ID field. I'm going to copy that. We're going to put that in the external ID and then click next. So now that we've granted the access, we have to tell it what policy it has access through. Okay, remember we made that policy before we called rel cost demo. We change this to customer managed like we did before, and we select rel cost demo. Then we hit next. Now it gives us a summary. It wants us to name the role. We're going to call it rel cost role, maybe demo role. Okay. And again, we can give it a description if we want to. And then we click create role. And now in the roles, you're going to see rel cost demo role. Ta-da! Now that that's created, we want to click next. And now we have to copy the ARN from the role that we just created. So to enable account access, capture the ARN associated with the role you just created. If we go back over to roles and we select our role that we just created, the ARN is right here. We click copy, and then we paste it in over here. And then we click next. All right, now we're at the review details section. This is really just a summary of what we just configured. You might want to review this and make sure everything that looks like it's supposed to. And you click the add button. And now what this is going to do is it's going to go through and test all the configuration that we just put in place. And as long as I didn't make any mistakes, we should get a nice green check mark. Click exit, and now we should have an AWS cost integration right here for Amazon Web Services. Okay, and last but not least, we have to actually configure our instance to use extended lifecycle support. Now, there's a few pieces that we have to do there. The first is there are tags that have to be put in place on the AWS side that tell AWS that this is a RHEL system and that it is an ELS, it has the ELS add-on attached to it. And then we have to enable the ELS repo, which actually has the software in it. And then, after that, we should have a system that is ready to be updated through ELS and getting billed properly when it's up and running. Okay, so now we're back to the next step in the process, which is we have to add tags to our systems. Now remember this page where we went and set up the reporting source? That is done. We're done with that piece. The next thing we have to do is this one, tag your systems. To classify systems, such as which of them are RHEL instances and what add-ons they consume, you can read this right here, we have to tell AWS which systems use what entitlements, okay? So the first thing we have to do is configure tags on our integrations. So in the documentations for configuring the tags on the integrations, the first thing that we need to do, and I know this might sound backwards, but AWS has to know about the tags before we can enable them within the billing environment. So the first thing we have to do is back on the console for EC2. We have to find our instance. Remember, we did this rel 7-2. Go down here to this tab for tags, and we have to add in tags. Okay, now you can see there's already a tag here for the name of the instance. That's not the one that we care about. You click Manage Tags. We're going to add a new tag. And back on this documentation page, this box here that says different tag names, Red Hat RHEL Red Hat RHEL conversion, that'd be if we were converting a CentOS system, com Red Hat RHEL add-on, and com Red Hat RHEL. So com Red Hat RHEL, we're going to add that tag. That's the key. And then we put a 7 in here because it's RHEL 7. We're going to add another tag for the add-on, right? Com Red Hat RHEL add-on. Paste that here, and then this should say ELS. So setting com Red Hat RHEL add-on to ELS tells AWS to assign that tag to this system. Once we're done setting this up, that'll end up in your cost reporting. And that cost reporting will then tell the billing system that this is a system that should be billed hourly for ELS usage as well as RHEL usage. Okay, so we're going to hit save, and it's going to add those tags. Now if you look at my other system here, go down to tags, you'll see they're already there, right? See, here's com Red Hat RHEL add-on, and then there's the com Red Hat RHEL 7. Okay, now the other thing that we need to do is, now that we've added the tags to a EC2 instance, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for this next step to actually show the tags and let us enable them. So if you don't see them right away, you will on mine because I've already added them to that other system. But on yours, if you go to the next pane that we're going to go to and you do not see the tags, give it some time and then come back. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's a couple hours, but you'll have to come back and then you'll see the tags. Once you see them in there, you will see them forever, right? So but if this is your first time going through this procedure, you may not see them yet. Okay, so now we have to go and activate these in the cost management features of AWS. All right, so we need to activate the tags. They'll be collected by the cost management application through the data export. In the AWS billing console, select the tags, right? Now, there's another help doc from AWS about how to turn these on, but I'm just going to show it to you because I've been through this a few times. I'm going to go back to the AWS console. This time we're going to go up to my billing and cost management in the menu at the far upper right where you click on your name. Okay, and then once this loads, you can see that I've already got cost data in here because I've been running some demos and trying out this feature before I did this recording. So I've got cost data for July already and some for August. And you can see I've already got these two cost tags underneath the cost allocation coverage block here. Card, I guess you want to call it. However, yours will be empty. Maybe not empty, but your tags, the cost allocation coverage tags, will not contain these rel tags if you just started setting this up. You want to click on this allocate your costs with cost allocation tags down here at the bottom. I hope that's easy enough to see in the recording. And it's going to show you, this is where I said those tags may not show up immediately. So you can see it's got a tag here for name because it just sees all the tags that are across all of your things within AWS. That's exactly what these tags are for. That's set to inactive. You can see on my screen that says inactive. On your screen, you may have more tags if your organization is already using tags. If you didn't have any tags, and it's going to look very similar to this, except the Red Hat rel and Red Hat rel add-on tags are going to say inactive next to them. What you do is you'll check those, and this deactivate button will say activate instead. In fact, I can show you on the name tag. If I click name, you can see activate is up here, right? I'm not going to activate name for cost allocation because that'd be silly, but if you check the two rel ones and then you click activate, then that part of the setup is done, and you should be ready to move on. The next step is to enable the metering service on your AWS integration. Now, what they're talking about is the integration we just added to the hybrid cloud console. And I'll show you where you would turn it on. However, because I just added this, it's already on for mine. Okay, so we're back on the hybrid cloud console. We're going to click on our AWS cost integration. And down toward the bottom, you're going to see metered product. And in metered product, if it says none, you want to set it to Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But like I said, if you make a brand new one, it's going to set it to rel to begin with. Okay, so that's all of the steps underneath AWS. Okay, so at this point, we're ready to configure your RHEL 7 system to use the extended lifecycle support repositories. Now, there's two things that have to happen to make that work. The first is the system needs to be registered through Subscription Manager. Now, this is the traditional way that RHEL systems get updates from Red Hat. In a cloud world, you're normally getting updates directly from your hyperscaler using what's called Red Hat Update Infrastructure, or RUI. In this case, the extended lifecycle support repositories have to come from us because that's the only place that they live. So the way to get that done is we subscribe your system with Subscription Manager directly to Red Hat. And then once you're subscribed, we turn on a feature that tells your cloud instance that it is now allowed to get updates directly from Red Hat. And then we enable the ELS repository. Now you can see here, step 2, this is register your system. This is where we're going to use Subscription Manager to register the system directly to Red Hat. And then in step 3 here, we're going to tell Subscription Manager to use CDN delivered content. And then in step 4, we're going to turn on the ELS repositories. So I'm going to take you through all 3 of those steps without switching back and forth, but you can always go back to this documentation to see how this is done. Okay, so here we are back at our RHEL 7 system. This is that system that I updated earlier in the video. Now, from here, all we have to do, like I said, step 2 was register your system. That's pretty straightforward. Subscription manager, register. Okay, now we have to give it a username and a password that will let you register the system directly to Red Hat. Now, this is not your cloud provider's username and password. This is your Red Hat ID or your Red Hat customer login. Now, for me, I've got a Red Hat login. This will look more like your email address, perhaps, in your case. For me, it's tmm-nlager. And then, of course, you put in your password. And what this is going to do is it's going to reach directly out to Red Hat and say, hey, I've got a RHEL 7 system here. I'd like to register it with Red Hat. And that's really all it does. Okay, so the warning that it's giving you here is just that using Subscription Manager has enabled some plugins within Yum. This is an okay thing. This is something that happens when you do the registration. Now, let's clear the screen here. And now we're going to run the other commands that were, again, they're right out of that documentation that I showed you. So I'm going to copy them right out of here. This is step number 3. We're going to tell Subscription Manager that it's allowed to use RHSM managed repositories. Okay? And there's no output to that. So don't worry if it comes back just like it did for me, that there's no yes or no that worked or it didn't work. That is by design. Okay, so step number 4, we have to enable the ELS repository. So I'm copying this command directly from the documentation that I showed just a second ago. And what this is telling Subscription Manager to do is interact with repositories and turn on the ELS repository. So we're going to hit enter. And this takes a little bit of time to run just because it's making some exchanges back and forth with Red Hat and moving some certificates around and things like that. Okay, repository is enabled for this system. That is the desired output. And then it brings us back to a prompt. Now we should have a system that is ready to use extended lifecycle support repositories. Now the thing that you get from these extended lifecycle support repositories is updates beyond June 30th of 2024. So these are things like security patches, mainly, that we've decided are critical enough that they need to be backported to customers that are still on RHEL 7. So if I do an update now, let's clear the screen. Okay, so now that we've enabled that ELS repository, if we do another check for updates, what we should see is that there are, in fact, updates available for this system. Okay, it's telling us all of the updates that are currently available. So now if I were to do a Yum update, it'll actually apply all these patches. Now these are things that have happened since the 7.9 end of normal lifecycle, right? So this is all stuff that has come to the extended lifecycle. You can see here it says the repository it got it from is RHEL 7 server ELS RPMs. That means that these are exclusive to ELS. So if you don't have ELS, you don't get all these fixes, right? You can see there's fixes to Python and systemd, important things. All right, so one last thing I wanted to show you before we're done for today, and that is how you can look at your usage. Now, obviously, you saw in the cost allocation in AWS what it looks like on that side, but here we are back at the Hybrid Cloud Console on Red Hat's side. And if we go under Services here, down to Subscriptions and Spend, and underneath Red Hat Enterprise Linux here, we go to subscription usage. You're going to see this is where you would normally track things like your subscription allocations through all of your normal Red Hat estate. There's a new place. So look, see, these are all the systems that are registered to my demo account, right? There is a new variant that you can filter for in here. You can see there's one here for ELS annual. That'd be like traditional ELS. And then there's ELS on demand. There's also ELS for on-demand for third-party Linux migrations, but that's not what we just configured. So if I click on ELS on demand, you're going to see that I actually have usage data in my graph here. And that's because I had that system that was already up and running for a little while. Now this isn't always up to the second, right? This updates periodically as the data is put into that S3 bucket and moved around and parsed and cycled and all that stuff. But you can see I've got 19 vCPU hours daily on my instances, and monthly 139, right? So you can see I don't use a ton of of EC2s. This is just a demo account. But this is where you're going to see that information. So Good to know where to find it. It even tells me where it's getting the data from. This is that system I already had configured. The one that you see here, that was that rel instead of rel-2. The rel-2 isn't going to show up here right away. This will show up once it has some data allocated, or I should say once it has some data collected, and then that data is processed and parsed and put into this graph. Then you'll see that one show up in this list as well. All right, and there you have it. As you can see, we have a system that's set up and running. It's got ELS. We can see it in our usage graph within the hybrid cloud console, and we should be getting billed for it through our cloud provider, which is probably the way you're used to receiving bills for these particular instances anyway. All right, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.